Have President Trump and the new PATRIOT Republican Party already seceded? Well, that's precisely what one far-left website is arguing. In this video, we're going to take a look at that argument. You're going to have your opportunity to let us know what you think in the comments section below. And stick with me to the very end of this video where I reveal to you the real secession that is indeed happening right before our very eyes. You're not going to want to miss this. Greetings, everyone. Patriots all across the globe. Dr. Steve here with you. Great to be with you as always. I'm your daily fake news antidote offering patriotic analysis to help you to think better so you can feel better in these crazy and turbulent times. So if you haven't already done so, you know what to do. Make sure to smack that bell and subscribe. But before we begin, let's give a huge shout out to our sponsor, Zippy Loans. Zippy Loans offers an expansive network of lenders that provides you with premium access to the personal loans you need. All you got to do is just click on the link below and you can get up to $15,000 directly deposited into your bank account as soon as the next day. Give them a try by clicking on the link below or go to getazippyloan.com. That's getazippyloan.com today. All right, gang, let's dive right in here. So, has Trump and the GOP already seceded from the blue states and the bumbling Biden embarrassments in D.C.? Well, that's the argument that the far-left activists over at Salon.com are making here. It's a very, very interesting argument that I wanted to share with you and get your opinion in the comments section below. Now, some background here, as many of you know, one of the trends that we follow very, very closely on this channel is the worldwide trend of secession. For better, for worse, for right or for wrong, scholars have noticed that secession is more pervasive today than it's ever been. Now, if you don't know, this secessionist trend really began with the collapse of the Soviet Union on Christmas Day, 1991. Soviet Union basically dissolved, and as a result, virtually overnight, Russia lost a third of its territories, with all of its satellite nations like Georgia and Armenia and Estonia and Belarus and Uzbekistan and the like. Scholars such as Sam Huntington of Harvard, Stepan Mostrovich of Texas A&M have argued, in effect, that what happened to the Soviet Union was going to happen more and more to nations around the world. And that's because the modern Cold War era that defined geopolitics for at least two generations was over as of 1991, and a new politics was emerging, which was fast replacing the modern world with a postmodern world where more and more populations were returning to their own cultures, customs, and traditions. They were going back to things like region and religion, and yes, race and ethnicity as a basis for a new postmodern social order. And it's not just happening in terms of nations breaking away from empires, but like what we saw in the Balkans, we're seeing more and more populations within nations wanting to secede and form their own sovereign nations. So we can see Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia, Lithuania. In Africa, of course, you've got Rwanda, Burundi, South Sudan. You have major secessionist movements in Scotland and Quebec and Catalonia. We could go on. And so the $10,000 question in all of this is simple. Are the nation states that were forged in the modern era going to be able to hold together as we move into a postmodern era? That's the $10,000 question. So it's no coincidence that secessionist sentiments are at an all-time high right now here in the United States. I did a video that you definitely want to check out on how support for secession has absolutely surged among Trump and Biden voters. Red and blue states basically want a divorce. And the polling consistently shows that the numbers coming out in favor of that divorce are growing by the day. And again, we can see why, given these worldwide trends, these dynamics of the world moving away from modernism into postmodernism. Well, if the far leftists over at Salon are right in this, it may in fact be the case that such a secession has already taken place in all but name. Now, I'm talking about an article that came out just the other day. Here's the headline: "A New Confederacy, Trump and the Republicans have already seceded." And the byline reads, "Now they're preparing to fight a new civil war. In fact, they're already doing it in all but name." For me, it's a fascinating piece because it recognizes that the growing divide between red states and blue states is one over national identity and culture. When you have two populations so radically divided as we are here in the United States, it does become a legitimate question. Are we basically two different countries within a single nation, as it were? right? Have we basically separated from one another in such a way that reflects an informal secession, right? Well, of course, without the formality, right? So the article basically, what it does is it delineates the fundamental cultural differences between red states and blue states and how those cultural differences are shaping fundamentally incompatible politics. So for example, according to the article, when it comes to how we conduct elections, 19 red states have enacted election integrity laws fundamentally opposed to those of blue states. Among those states, 15 states have radically reduced the ability to even apply for a mail-in ballot. 4 states have gotten rid of drop boxes altogether. 10 states have imposed stricter voter ID requirements. When it comes to issues such as abortion, 19 states have enacted a total of 106 new pro-life laws that radically restrict abortion. 12 states have more or less outright banned abortion, and 25 states require at least a 24 to 48 hour waiting period. When it comes to the whole issue of gun control and the right to bear arms, dozens and dozens of states have become Second Amendment sanctuaries. And now, with the whole COVID situation, we've got 20 states who are refusing to enact or enforce Biden's vax mandates on companies with 100 or more employees. So as we talked about the other day, when this leftist article, what this leftist article concludes, when all said and done, we are increasingly becoming countries within a country, nations within a nation, where more and more states are basically declaring their independence from blue states and our federal government, as long, of course, as it's run by Marxist Democrats and obnoxious rhinos. Now, I've got to say, I think this article is on to something. I do believe we are seeing an informal secession here, but there's not so much a secession from a nation as much as it is from an old world, or better, an old political order. What Trump and the new GOP, the new Republican Patriot Party, is doing is they're seceding not so much from the nation, but rather from the politics of the old Cold War era. An era that saw the United States as the policeman of the world, with the neocons pushing for a Pax Americana, where the secularization of culture was considered unstoppable, where the days of definitive borders and nation states were beginning to wane in favor of more centralized globalist political and economic order. All of that is collapsing. What we have to understand is that our current political and cultural crisis is not a partisan clash over this issue or that issue. I don't think the clash that we all sense we're experiencing here is a clash between this crisis or that crisis. The clash we're experiencing right now is not something within society. What is it? It's a clash over society itself. It's a clash between two fundamentally incompatible visions of life, secular versus post-secular, modern versus postmodern, materialist versus post-materialist, globalist versus nationalist, right? There are various ways and models in which scholars are trying to make some sense of this incompatibility. But what all of the models boil down to is that the clash we're experiencing in our politics is not something within politics. Rather, it's a clash over politics itself, over the nature of politics. For example, we're not clashing over whether this or that election was fair. We're clashing over the very nature of what a free and fair election actually is. Or think about how proponents of CRT and BLM are arguing. Our clash isn't between this event or that event in America. The clash is over what it means to be an American. So what all this means is that what we're currently experiencing, in Samuel Huntington's terms, we're currently experiencing a clash of civilizations within our nation. I'll say that again because I think it's so key here. What the Salon.com article is somewhat getting is that we are experiencing a kind of clash of civilizations within our own nation. And this is why everything today is political and polarizing. Gang, even kindergarten today is controversial. Let that hit you. Everything is political and polarizing. Literally everything, precisely because the clash is civilizational, which by definition involves everything. And so in light of this larger context, I see Trump as representative, perhaps more than anyone else, of a renewed civic nationalism that challenges the norms, the progressive liberal norms of globalism that leftists over at Salon are so desperately trying to hold on to. Trump and the new Patriot GOP represent the rising of a new post-Cold War, postmodern, post-secular world order that is indeed replacing the old modernist globalist Cold War era. It is that era, that old liberal progressive era, that more and more Americans are indeed seceding from. Now, before you go, you will definitely want to check out my latest video on how support for secession is indeed surging among Trump and Biden voters. We take a deep dive into that. You're not going to want to miss it, so make sure to click on the link, and I'll see you over there. God bless.